Hello.
Hi.
Welcome again to Hedgespoken Picturehouse, brought to you today with the presence of the lovely Gabia, who some of you may have met before if you caught our show last year. It wasn't even last year, year before last. Iron Brown Thorncoat, which was another Lithuanian tale.
I thought that it might be nice to have her presence here. The mask was carved by amazing puppet carver Jan Zalud from my design, and the design on her forehead is based on a Lithuanian weather vane, which has lots of old folk symbolism in it, and I thought it was really apt for the story we're going to tell you tonight about the Sun Princess.
So indeed, tonight we have a Lithuanian tale for you. It's another very long story, very strange, full of unexpected twists and turns. I hope you can all hear us. If you flick over to do Alt Tab on that, you should be able to see some stream or another. Hopefully we're all here and everything's going right. Mostly seemed to work last time, which was nice. And are you sitting comfortably or lying comfortably? A bed in your home? Then I think we should probably begin. Do you want to do a little tune just to start us off? Or a couple of deep accordion breaths. Beyond 9 mountains, beyond 9 rivers, there is a kingdom where the roses grow as big as your hand and smell as sweet as honey, maybe even sweeter. And in that kingdom, there was a castle. And in the castle lived a king and a queen and their son. And their son was called Alexis. And he had everything that he could possibly want. He had no shortage of gifts, constantly coming in a stream to his door. And he always had entertainment from the courtiers, musicians to play, dancers to dance with him. Any game he wanted to play, he could play. But what Alexis wanted more than anything else was a brother or a sister. And of them, there was none to be seen. And every so often, Alexis, when he was feeling sad about this, he would go to his mother and his father and say, I long to have a brother and sister. Please, can we not solve this? And they would shake their heads and look awkward, frankly, and usher him off to some new entertainment. And dancers would come in and musicians would come in with drums and cymbals and fiddles. And so things went on in the castle, and Alexis would prowl around, as young boys do. And in the years that passed, prowling around this castle, he came to know it very well. One fateful day, when he was on that strange cusp of childhood and adulthood, he was prowling around, looking for some kind of interesting excitement, and he had his bow and arrow. And he came to a part of the castle where there was a big wall, a huge wall. And sitting on top of this wall, there was a raven. And Alexis, I'm sorry to say, took up his bow and arrow and he aimed at the raven and he was going to shoot it. And the raven turned and looked at him with its beady eyes and said, no, no, no. Alexis, don't do this. I tell you what, if you spare my life, I'll tell you a secret. And a secret was about the most exciting thing that Alexis had offered to him for a very long time. So he put down the bow and arrow and said, tell me. And the raven said, well, this secret is that you have 3 sisters. And Alexis's heart leapt in his chest. And the raven said, furthermore, these 3 sisters are inside this castle. This wall you see goes all the way around a garden. And inside this garden there is a wooden palace. And inside that palace live your sisters. Would you like to meet them? And Alexis, of course, said, yes, I long to meet my sisters. Tell me, tell me. And the raven said, well, there is a key to a secret door in this wall. It's just down there. If you look very closely, you can see the outline. But the key to this door is hidden under your mother's pillow. What you must do is sneak into your mother's bedchamber, pull it out, come out here at night under the moon and open up the gate, and then you can go in and meet those sisters. And so saying, the raven flew off. Well, that very night, when everyone in the castle was asleep, Alexis crept through the corridors into his mother's bedchamber, and sure enough, sliding his hand under her pillow, he found the key, pulled it out, made his way to the garden, found the doorway, opened it up, and went into this moonlit secret garden full of these precious, delicious roses. And sure enough, there in the garden, there was a wooden palace. And wasting no time, Alexis went up to the door of the wooden palace, knocked on it, and 3 young women answered the gate. And he said to them, I am Alexis, I am your brother, you are my sisters that I've been parted from for so long, I don't know why. Tell me all the stories about everything that's happened in your lives, and I'll tell you mine. And so they invited him in, and he began to tell his story, and they began to tell their stories, but they'd not got very far in the telling when suddenly an almighty wind rose up from nowhere. And before they knew it, looking out of the door of the wooden palace, they saw a whirlwind approaching. And as they watched, and as Alexis watched in horror, the whirlwind swept up his sisters, and the whirlwind swept out of the castle and was gone. And all anyone could hear, if they were listening, was some distant laughter. Now Alexis, of course, was heartbroken and deeply confused by the turn of events. And there was nothing for him to do but leave that walled garden, close the door behind him, and go back to bed. But the next morning there is a great kerfuffle in the castle, because the queen has been down to the walled garden and has found the door unlocked. And when she's gone inside, she's found that the 3 daughters are gone. And she goes and she tells the king. And this king is an old king, and he is not a merry old soul. And when he hears what's happened, he is absolutely beside himself with fury. And he calls everyone into the throne room, demanding to know who has been into the walled garden and let this catastrophe happen. And Alexis watches all this. And eventually he steps forward and says, Father, I have to admit, it was me. I went in. I was curious to find these sisters that you kept from me, and I don't understand why you did. Can you tell me? And the king says to him, he says, Alexis, you are young and foolish. Long ago, there was a prophecy that if I did not keep these daughters hidden, they would be taken up by a dragon in the shape of a whirlwind and swept off to some distant land. And so I kept them safe there in the wooden palace. And you now, through your foolishness, oh, Alexis, you have caused that fate to come on them and come on us. I am most displeased with you, Alexis. And in fact, he's so displeased that despite his wife's protestations, he commands that Alexis be thrown out of the castle and into exile. It's all his mother can do to put a loaf of bread into a bag to put across his shoulder and then there he is, thrown out, and the gates of the castle clanging shut behind him. And so Alexis leaves the castle and the life he's known and sets out on the road ahead of him with his king's words echoing in his ears: do not come back until you have your three sisters with you. Until then, you are not welcome in this castle. Well, Alexis goes out into the world searching for his sisters. And if he walks for a day, he walks for a week. If he walks for a week, it's a month. If he walks for a month, it's a year, and the elements batter him and he sleeps beside the path using his bag for a pillow. Nothing. But eventually he comes to a little house by the side of the road, and he knocks on the door, and an old woman answers it. And she looks him up and down and says, yes, how can I help you? And Alexis says, I am on a great quest. I am a prince, you see, and I have to find a dragon who has swept off my sisters. Can you help me in any way with this quest that I'm on? And the old woman stifles a laugh and she says to him, oh, Prince, you have spent too much time sitting on your backside in a castle. Look at you. You're in no state to fight dragons or rescue princesses at this stage. But I'll make you a bargain. If you come into my house, live here, and work for me for a year, then I'll do my best to make sure that you're ready at the end of that to go on with your journey stronger than you are today. And Alexis, in his heart, he knows that what she says is true. He's soft, and he's afraid, and he's not ready for the adventure that he's on. And so he says yes, and credit to him. He spends that year living in the old woman's house, and she works him hard. He sleeps by the fire. He's up at the crack of dawn, working in the garden, sowing things, growing things, harvesting things, lifting things, carrying things for the old woman. And it's not cruel work, but she does work him hard. And at the end of that year, she looks him up and down and says, I think you're ready as you're ever going to be. Go back on the road, but now take this ball of string with you. Roll this string in front of you, and where it goes, you'll follow, and it will take you on the adventure you need to have. Good luck to you. And she waves him goodbye, and Alexis sets off on the road. He tosses the ball of string in front of him, and dinkety dinkety donkety dinkety donk, off it goes down the path, and he follows behind as he's been instructed. Well, he follows it for I don't know how long, but by and by he finds himself at the foot of a mountain. And it's a pretty strange mountain, this one. It's covered in a forest, but the forest is made of trees whose trunks and leaves and branches are all made of copper. And up at the distant top of this mountain, he can see a castle, also made entirely of copper. And he looks at this castle and thinks, well, I need to go up to this castle, obviously. This is where things are taking me. But I need a staff. And so he goes to one of the copper trees and he breaks off a branch of the copper tree, and it makes a lovely, strange metal staff. And he starts making his way up the mountain. But he's not gone far at all when there is the most hideous screeching from behind him. And he turns round and sees flying through the air the most revolting looking Lithuanian witch. And these Lithuanian witches, I don't know about all Lithuanian witches, but this Lithuanian witch has 4 eyes and long fingers, and and they're outstretched to grab him by the neck. And Alexis gazes in horror at this terrible thing approaching him, but he has his wits about him, and sure as he can, he picks up the ball of string and throws it at the witch. And the witch goes to catch the ball of string, but her attention is diverted by this catch, and she smacks headlong into the trunk of one of the copper trees and falls unconscious to the ground. Alexis picks up the ball of string and carries on up the mountain. Now, at the top of the mountain, he stands there in front of the copper castle, and he knocks on the gate, stands back and looks around, and he sees up at the top window of the castle someone is spinning. And who should it be that's spinning but his youngest sister? What are the chances of that? Well, I'd say about fair certain in this story. And she comes down and she greets him at the gate, and they embrace. Tears of joy are shed, and she invites him in, and they spend their time talking, and he tells her everything that's happened since he last saw her for just that brief moment. And they're chatting away, eating some nice food, and suddenly there's a kind of rumbling, thrashing sound. And Alexis looks at his sister and he says, "What is that strange sound?" And she says, "Brother, there are things that I've not told you yet. It's been quite a time since I was swept up in the whirlwind. I'm fair giddy with everything that's been going on. But that'll be my husband returning. I'm terribly afraid that when he finds you here, he might actually just eat you up. Quick, hide behind the curtains." And so Alexis goes and hides behind the curtains and waits. And it's not long before he hears the thrashing of great wings, and then the sound of feet, possibly claws, coming across the room. There's a sniff, and a voice says, "I smell a stranger. Tell me, wife, who is visiting us in our castle?" And the sister says, "Well, before I tell you, I'll ask you a question. If they were a friend or a kinfolk of mine, would you greet them kindly or would you just eat them?" And he says, "My wife, of course. A friend or kin of yours, I'll greet with open arms." And so the sister says, "Well, it is my brother Alexis," and she ushers him out from behind the curtains. And he comes out and sees there, standing in front of him, a full human-sized falcon. And he kind of awkwardly puts out his hand to shake a leg or a wing or something. I don't know how they do it. Maybe they do this. And he greets him. And the falcon greets Alexis, and they all sit down and they enjoy a lovely evening meal together, sharing stories, having a laugh, drinking some wine. It's a lovely occasion. But the next morning, Alexis says, "Listen, this is all very nice, but I must be on my way to find my other sisters. Is there any advice you can give me?" he asks the falcon. And the falcon says, "Well, I don't know. It's a strange world because, you see, I'm under a curse. And I've been under a curse for a long time, and I shall be under a curse for a long time still. From the Sun Princess, you see. I was once human, but she has turned me into this falcon. And I would ask that if on your adventure you find the Sun Princess, ask her to lift the curse from me. I would love to be a human again. And I have a gift for you before you go." He reaches somewhere, he pulls out a silver cloth, silver handkerchief, and he passes it to Alexis and says, "When you're in trouble and you need assistance, open up this cloth and shake it, and it will provide what you need." This is a great gift indeed, and Alexis thanks him heartily. He says goodbye to both of them, tells them that he'll see them again before too long, and if he sees the Sun Princess, he's sure to petition her. And then off he goes, tossing the ball of string, dinkety 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 dink, down the path it goes. Well, he follows the ball of string, and if he walks for a day, it's a week. If it's a week, it's a month. But by and by, he comes to another mountain, and this one is covered in trees made of silver, and there's a silver castle at the top of it. And you know what? While he's going up the slopes of that mountain, he breaks off a staff for himself of silver, and 2 witches come for him. And he throws the ball of string, and you know what? Their heads together and fall to the ground unconscious. He makes his way to the top of the silver mountain, and who should he see at the top of the castle there at the window? His second sister. Well, she invites him in. They spend some time together, and then after a while there's a terrible rumbling, crashing sound, and the same thing happens, except this time it turns out that the second sister's husband is a bear. And Alexis, shaking a little with fear, greets the bear, and the bear greets him, and they enjoy an evening together. And the next morning, Alexis is about to set off, and he asks the bear if he has any advice for him. And the bear says, well, if you meet the Sun Princess, petition her to lift the curse from me, and I will give you this gift for your journey. You'll know what to do when the time comes. And he gives him, can you believe this? A bear in a folk tale gives Alexis a pot full of porridge. And Alexis thinks this is a strange gift, but there's a lot going on here that I really do not understand at all. He thanks the bear, and off he goes, rolling the ball of string, dinkety 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 dink, off down the path it goes, and he follows on behind. Well, by and by, Alexis comes to a third mountain, and can you possibly guess what this mountain is all about, what the trees are made of, and what the castle is at the top? The trees are made of gold, and so is the castle. And as Alexis is making his way up, he breaks off a staff of gold, and he is assailed by how many, do you think? 1 witch the first time, 2 witches the second time. 1 witch, but a terrible, terrible witch comes for him. And Alexis, thinking fast, scoops up porridge out of the porridge pot, smears the trunk of a tree, and at the last minute jumps out of the way, and the witch flies smack like a fly into the trunk of the tree. And with her arms and legs thrashing about in a most undignified manner, she is stuck fast to the trunk of the tree, and Alexis makes his way up to the top of the mountain. And at the golden palace atop, who do you think is up there at the top window? It is his eldest sister, joy of joys. She invites him in, and the same thing happens. There's a terrible thrashing and crashing and a kind of slippering and a sloppering sound. And it turns out that his eldest sister has married a pike. And for those of you who don't know what a pike is, it is a fish that lives in river. Does it live in the sea? I don't think so, but it might do. But they're renowned for eating other fish, and also being not very good for eating because they got lots of bones. And it's this huge pike. And anyway, Alexis greets the pike, and the pike greets Alexis, and they get on like a house on fire. And the next morning, as he's about to set off, Alexis asks the pike whether he's got any advice or information to give him about his quest, because now he is off to find the Sun Princess. He's got 3 brothers-in-law who need a curse lifting, and he's got a taste for this adventure now. And the pike says to him, go on, get this curse lifted from me if you can, but take this silver snuff box with you. And when you're in the time of your greatest need, open up the snuff box, and it will provide exactly what you require. And Alexis thanks the pike, waves goodbye to his sister, takes the ball of string. Now he's got his pot of porridge, he's got his silver handkerchief, and he's got his silver snuff box, rolls the ball of string, dinkety, 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 dink, down the path it goes, and he follows on behind. Well, young Alexis goes on. He's had quite an adventure already, but he is now on a serious quest. And he follows his ball of string, dinkety, 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 dink, down the path. And if it's a day, it's a week. If it's a week, it's a month. If it's a month, it's a year that he goes on. By and by, he finds himself standing in front of the most extraordinary palace he has ever seen. Its walls are white hot, and it radiates an incredible heat. And at the gate of this palace are two pillars of fire, that whenever anything approaches, any unfortunate animal or bird, the pillars slam together, and the poor thing is incinerated. And Alexis thinks to himself, I cannot go up these steps. I'll be crushed and burned to death. And so he does a clever thing. He takes the ball of string and throws it in front of him. And as the pillars smash together and burn the ball of string and separate, Alexis leaps between them in a most heroic manner. And as he stands there, catching his breath on the doorstep, he hears a voice. And the voice says, "Visitor, tell me, have you come to woo the Sun Princess? Or have you come to threaten her?" And Alexis thinks for a moment and he says, "Well, frankly, I haven't met her yet, so I cannot answer your question truthfully." And there's a laugh like tiny bells. And the voice says, "Well, in that case, let us show this young prince our finest guest room." And a whirlwind spins up, sweeps Alexis off his feet, and carries him down to the deepest dungeon of the castle. And when he's caught his breath and he looks around him, he sees only darkness everywhere. Apart from one tiny window high up in one of the stone walls, and the tiny window is in the shape of a heart. And that's the only place that light comes into this dank chamber. And as his eyes grow accustomed to the gloom, Alexis can make out figures in the darkness, and eventually he sees that he is in a dungeon full of very old men. And after a while he can see them closer, and he can see that the youngest of them has a long white beard that's down to his knees. And Alexis asks him, "How long have you been here?" And the old man says, "I don't know. I was young when I came in, and now I am 100 years old." And peering deeper into the corners of the room, he finds even older men lying down, using their beards as pillows. And the old men say, some of the oldest in here, they say they are thousands of years old. We will never escape, and you will never escape, Alexis. Give up hope now. All we get is a handful of oats tossed through the window once a day, and a jug of water passed down on a rope. And Alexis takes this in, and he sits and he waits. And the next time oats are thrown down from that high window, as the old men lever themselves up to start scrabbling amongst the cobbles for these oats, Alexis gathers up every single oat in his hands, crunches it into a ball, and throws it back up out of the window. And the old men are beside themselves with fury. They say, this was our only meal for the day. We will starve. What are you doing? And Alexis says, I would rather starve to death than peck around on the floor like a hen for oats. The old men shake their heads and lie back down and try and sleep. And when the jug of water is lowered down on a rope, before the old men can get to it, Alexis unties it, takes it, and throws the jug of water out of the window as well. The old men curse, shake their heads, and go back to sleep. And Alexis waits. Well, high up in the Sun Princess's throne room, word gets to her of what's happening. And she's curious. This is not normal behavior for her guests. And so she sends down one of her handmaidens to find out what's going on. And this dungeon has 27 iron doors. And when the sound of those iron doors being opened carries in to the dark dungeon, there's great excitement, as you can imagine. And when the Sun Princess's handmaiden, whose name is Bright Dawn, opens up the last of those 27 doors, she goes inside expecting to find, as she always finds, the old men lying there, asleep, groaning in misery. But no, what is this? Spread out on the floor is a silver handkerchief, and surrounding it is all the finest foods that you can possibly imagine. Fine wines and mead and ale, everything that you could possibly want in a feast is there. And Bright Dawn looks and she sees Alexis sitting there, enjoying a meal with the old men. And she says, how is this? How can this be? What is going on in the dungeon? Bright Dawn is very beautiful. Her radiance is so great that no one can barely look at her. But Alexis looks straight at her and says, I have a magical handkerchief. When I command it, it gives me whatever I want. Here, take it as a gift for the Sun Princess. Tell her she has my utmost respect. Bright Dawn smiles and she takes the silver handkerchief and she closes the 27 iron gates to the dungeon behind her, and she goes back up to the Sun Princess and gives her the silver handkerchief. And the Sun Princess smiles, a wry smile, and opens up her chest of special things, drops the silver handkerchief inside and closes it, and says no more. And of course the old men, when they've seen what Alexis has done, they are even more beside themselves than they were before. Well, the ones who've got any energy left, that is. And they berate him and say, what have you done? We could have lived in this dungeon in luxury with everything that we ever wanted to eat or drink, all manner of entertainments, and now you've just given it away. And Alexis says nothing, but trust me. The next day, when oats are thrown down again from that high heart-shaped window, Alexis does the same. He takes up the oats, throws them out of the window. The old men smack their foreheads, groan and sigh. This young prince is becoming a total pain in the arse. He's disrupting everything. They had a routine and they quite liked how it was going, apart from the fact that they were held in captivity for thousands of years. And when the water's lowered down, Alexis takes the jug and he throws that up out of the window as well. There's great cursing and groaning, and word gets to the Sun Princess. Curiouser and curiouser, she thinks. Is that a persistent dry cough you've got there? Loss of sense of taste? No, good. And the Sun Princess, up in her high chamber, she sends down another of her handmaidens, Evening Star, to go down and see what's going on. She goes down the long stairs and opens up the 27 iron doors. Clang, 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 clang. And when she opens that last iron door and looks in, she sees a scene of feasting and celebration. The silver snuff box is open, and all the fine foods you can imagine are surrounding it, and the old men are laughing and drinking and telling jokes, and Alexis is sitting there as well. And he invites her in. He says, "Evening Star, you magnificent being, bless us. Come and join us. Come sit, drink with us, eat." And truth be told, Evening Star is a bit of a party girl. And whilst she loves living in the Sun Princess's castle most of the time, actually sometimes it is a little bit dull, a little bit repetitive. And this is excitement. And so after a think and she says yes, and she goes into the dungeon and she sits down. And Alexis pours a goblet, passes it to her where she's sitting next to him, toasts her health, and they drink, and they eat, and they drink, and they eat, and they drink. Time goes by, and up in her throne room, the Sun Princess is wondering what's going on. She sent Evening Star down, and Evening Star is usually pretty reliable, but she has not returned. And possibly with a little tut to herself, the Sun Princess decides to go down herself and see what is happening in her dungeon. Well, she goes all the way down, finds that the doors to the room are standing almost open, and she goes in and she sees this great feast taking place. And when the Sun Princess goes into the room, as you can imagine, her radiance fills every corner, and all the old men shield their eyes. Alexis looks at her straight and says, "Sun Princess, honour us, come in, join our feast." And the Sun Princess shakes her head and she says, "Evening Star, what are you doing?" And Evening Star has just got involved in a complicated drinking game with one of the old men. And it has to be said that she's possibly had a little more mead than she could handle on this occasion. And she says to the Sun Princess, No, you don't understand. Come on in, join the party. Loosen up, Sun Princess. Come on, you're always so just... The Sun Princess looks at her. And Evening Star knows this look quite well, and she shuts up. And the Sun Princess beckons her. "Evening Star, you are making a spectacle of yourself. Come on out." And Evening Star goes to get up, and she can't. She is stuck fast to the ground with magical porridge. Alexis has her trapped. And the Sun Princess looks at Alexis, and Alexis looks at the Sun Princess. And Alexis eventually says, "Tell me, Sun Princess, what would you rather have? Would you rather have this silver snuff box that can give you anything you want, and this pot of magical porridge? Or would you have Evening Star return to you? Or would you take me as your husband? And the Sun Princess looks at him, looks at Evening Star, looks at the feast, and she says, I will have all three. Come. And so the spell is broken. Evening Star smooths her skirts and somewhat sheepishly goes out of the room. Alexis stands, bids farewell to the old men, closes the silver snuff box, picks up his pot of porridge, and leaves the dungeon, arm in arm with the Sun Princess. Well, the Sun Princess and Alexis, they get married that very day. And it's a lovely wedding. And they enjoy a bit of a honeymoon. And as soon as they're married, actually, Alexis says to the Sun Princess, listen, can we let these old men go? They've really been in that dungeon for quite long enough now, I think. And she says, yes, of course. And she releases them. And the old men come up and they are so grateful. They're crawling all over Alexis's feet and kissing them and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And Alexis commands them to leave the castle and says, I don't want to ever see you again. Be gone. And all is quiet and peaceful in the castle of the Sun Princess for a while. But the Sun Princess has duties. Every day, of course, you must leave the castle and traverse the heavens to bring light to the world so that crops can grow, so that life can go on. And so she leaves to go off on her journey. And before she leaves, she says to Alexis, enjoy the comforts of our castle, my castle, your castle, our castle, and explore wherever you like. I have many diverting rooms that you can go to. There are 40 of them. 39 of those rooms you may explore. The keys are all on this chain. But this key here opens the 40th door. And that room you may not go in. Do you understand? Alexis says, yes, 40th door, this key, don't go in it. I won't go in the 40th room. And so they kiss and embrace, and the Sun Princess goes off across the heavens. And Alexis starts exploring the castle. And all the keys have got numbers on, and he goes to room number 1 and he opens it up and he finds himself in the most incredible botanical garden that you can imagine. There's 1 or 2 of every plant that has ever existed on the earth. The room goes on forever, it seems. And he spends a long time walking in this room, marveling at the beauty of creation. But eventually he gets bored and he leaves that room and closes the door, locks it behind him. And he goes to room number 2 and he opens that up. And it's an incredible menagerie in there. There are 1 or 2 of every animal that has ever lived on the earth. And he explores that. It's fascinating, wonderful, terrifying, exciting. But by and by he gets bored of that room as well, and he closes the door and locks it. And he looks at his bunch of keys and he looks at 3 and 4 and 5 and 10, 20, 30. And before he knows it, he's looking at key number 4 and he's thinking, I wonder what is in room 40. I mean, this is all incredible stuff. Room 40's got to have something pretty spectacular in it, but I mustn't go in. But it would be good to know where it is, just so that I can avoid going into it. And so he finds the 40th door. And the 40th door is a bit different from all the rest. It has great bands of steel going across it. And down. The lock is huge. The key is massive. And he's standing there thinking, I must not go into room 40. Mustn't open the 40th door. And do you know what he does? He opens the door. He opens the door to room 40. Of course he does. And he just opens it a little bit because he's just going to have a little look, just to kind of know what he's dealing with. Because, you know, he's got responsibilities in the castle now, and really he should know all the rooms. That's what he thinks. And he looks inside, and it's actually quite a small room. It's got stone walls. You can't really see much. It doesn't seem to be particularly exciting or any kind of danger, really. So he opens the door a little bit more, and he pushes it wide open, steps inside to see what's going on. And it's the most peculiar sight that greets him, because in the middle of the room is a pillar of wood covered in lichen and moss. It's parched, dry wood. And the pillar of wood is chained by huge, great iron chains to 4 anchor points on the walls. In the corner of the room there's a barrel of water with a wooden cup next to it. And Alexis thinks to himself, well, this is odd, yes, but there's a lot I don't know about the Sun Princess. I think I'll just leave this here. I'll go and explore the other rooms. And he's just about to leave the room when he hears a voice. And the voice whispers to him. It says, Alexis, fetch me a cup of water. Just sprinkle a little bit of water onto the pillar. I'm so thirsty. And Alexis has got a kind and generous heart. And he can't turn down that request. Did you hear that owl? And so he goes over and he fills a cup of water and he sprinkles it onto the pillar and says, there you go. And he's about to leave the room when the whisper comes again, slightly stronger this time. It says, Alexis, just a little more water, please. I beg you. And Alexis goes over and a little cup of water, sprinkles it onto the pillar. Does this 2 times, 3 times. And after the 3rd sprinkling of water, as he's leaving the room, he hears laughter. And he stops in his tracks because the room is beginning to tremble and rumble and shake. And he notices that the chains are beginning to strain against the walls. And then one by one, snap, 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 snap. The chains are broken and the pillar, covered in moss and lichen, begins to writhe and stretch and change. And before his very eyes, emerging from this pillar of wood, is a giant that smashes down the walls of the room, smashes the ceiling above his head, looks down at Alexis and laughs. The giant says, Alexis, you are a kind young man, but you are also a fool. The Sun Princess has held me captive here for thousands of years, and now, thanks to your kindness, I am free. I am free to wreak my revenge. So saying, the giant smashes his way through part of the castle, leaps off the battlements, and begins to run across the face of the earth. When he's come to a point on the earth, he leaps up into the sky, and with one great hand, he grabs the Sun Princess from the sky, closes his fist around her, stuffs her into his pocket, and starts running to the north. And the world is plunged into darkness. Alexis is left alone in the castle. He climbs up onto the ruined battlements and looks down, and he sees a world of darkness. Where there should be light, there's only black. Only the night stars above him. And he thinks to himself, what have I done? I really shouldn't have opened the 40th door. Oh me, oh my, what am I going to do? And he spends some time mooching around in the castle, waiting for some kind of inspiration. And none comes. With the sun gone from the sky, the earth is starting to become colder. And he looks out from the battlements at the world below. He sees that the crops are beginning to fail in the fields. Ice is beginning to form on the tops crusts of the rivers. And the people all around, in all the places of the world, are starting to huddle alone in their houses. Warmth is starting to drain from their hearts. It's a terrible thing that's happened, and Alexis knows that it's on his shoulders. And so, by and by, he realizes that he has to try and make it right. And going out of the castle, he stops and takes the silver handkerchief and puts it back into his pocket. And he begins to walk and walk and walk towards the north. And if he walks for a day, it's a week. If it's a week, it's a month. If it's a month, it's a year. I don't know how long he walks for, but it's getting colder and colder and colder all the time. And far in the north is the kingdom of ice. And eventually Alexis makes his way through that kingdom until he comes to a great castle made of steel and ice, the castle of the giant. And Alexis thinks to himself, somewhere inside this castle is my beloved and the son that the world needs in order to live. I must rescue her. And so he makes his way to the gate. And there, guarding the gate of this giant's castle, is a goat. Not just any goat, mind you. It is a goat with 3 eyes. And Alexis looks at this goat sitting there, and he thinks, I know what to do with goats. The only way to defeat a goat is to sing it to sleep. And so he sings a lullaby to the goat, a lullaby that I will attempt to recreate for you here. In translation, of course, it's a powerful and beautiful song that I'm going to share with you tonight. Can you give me an E? Okay, thanks. He sings, go to sleep, little goat, you are very tired. There's a second verse that goes, go to sleep, little goat, you're so tired. And sure enough, the goat closes one eye, and Alexis sings again, and it closes the second eye and rests its head down. And Alexis forgets about the third eye of the goat. Who could forget about the third eye of the goat? But he does. And he tiptoes past. And the goat, half asleep, it has to be said, watches him with its third eye as Alexis makes his way into the giant's castle. And Alexis scours all the rooms until he comes to the throne room of the giant. And fortunately for him, the giant is out doing terrible things in the world. But there, chained to a stone throne in that room, is his beloved, the Sun Princess. And they greet each other with great joy, they kiss and they embrace, and Alexis, with his bare hands now, breaks the iron chains that bind her. And with the Sun Princess in his arms, they make their way out of the castle, tiptoe past the almost sleeping goat, and then they begin to run. And they run And they run as fast as they can, south, away from the castle of that terrible giant. Well, some time later, the giant returns to his castle, and he sniffs as he gets home. And he goes to his little goat that guards the castle, and he says, tell me, who has been visiting our castle? And the goat blinks its eyes and wakes up fully. And it says, Master, the Prince Alexis has been, and he has taken the Sun Princess. We must follow them and get her back. The giant thinks about this and he says, tell me, are you fast? Are you a fast runner, little goat? And the goat says, Master, there is no faster goat in all the kingdoms. And the giant says, well then, let us not rush. Tell me, if I was to plant corn in my garden, wait until it grows, then reap it, grind it, make flour, make bread, put the bread in the oven, and have a nice bit of toast with an egg. Would there still be time to catch them? Are you that fast? And the goat says, yes, master, I am even faster than that. And so the giant does. He grows some corn, reaps it, grinds it, makes some bread, toasts it, has a meal, and then he gets onto the back of the goat, clicks his heels, and the goat leaps into the air, up onto the top of the clouds. Where it strikes the clouds, there's lightning. This goat makes its way through the heavens and lands down on the ground in front of the Sun Princess and Alexis, where they are running south. And the giant gets off the back of the goat and says, Sun Princess, Alexis, fancy meeting you here. Alexis, I'll tell you what, you showed me kindness. You gave me water, even though it was a foolish thing to do, as I think you have realized. And so I will spare your life now. But if I see you again, it's going to be death for you. And so saying, he grabs the Sun Princess in his terrible hand, closes his fingers around her, puts her in his pocket, climbs back onto his goat, and up into the clouds, lightning, and back to the castle, where he binds the Sun Princess in even stronger chains. And Prince Alexis wanders the earth, not knowing what he's going to do. And the earth is getting colder and colder and colder. Ice has taken hold of everything now. People barely leave their houses. Frost has entered deep inside them. Everyone is hungry. There are no crops in the field. Nothing is growing. The animals are dying. People are starting to look at each other askance. The fat ones are getting nervous. Alexis sees all this happening, and he thinks, I have to do something about this. And he can't think of anything to do except go back to the giant's castle and try again. And so he does. He turns around and he heads back north. He goes back to the giant's castle and he sings a lullaby again. I'm not going to repeat it for you. It's too sacred. And gets into the castle, breaks the chains that are holding the Sun Princess. The two of them make their way out of the castle and run south. The giant returns home from doing his terrible work in the world and asks his goat what's happened. The goat says, Master, it has happened again. The giant says, well, tell me, little goat, if I was to grow a field of flax and harvest it make myself a nice new tunic out of the cloth, get dressed in my Sunday best, and then we set off. Would we still catch them? Are you that fast? And the goat says, oh, master, I am so much faster than that. And so it is, the giant grows flax, turns it into clothes, dressed in his finery, gets onto the back of the goat. Up they go into the clouds, and they come down to earth just in front of the Sun Princess and Alexis. And the giant says, Sun Princess, Alexis, here we are again. You really haven't learned, have you? This time, I'm afraid it's over. And he takes his club from his side, and with one great blow, he smashes Alexis' head, and Alexis falls dead to the ground, and the giant returns to his castle with the Sun Princess. The end. I'm sorry, it's not a very cheery story, that one. Yeah. But it's got a lot of wisdom in it, I suppose. And it's not the end. Of course it's not the end. Well, the giant returns to his castle. Alexis is lying there, dead on the ground. The world is in darkness. What can change? Well, a falcon we've met before, is flying high in the sky, looking down on the world and seeing all the trouble it's in. Frost forming on its wings as it flies. And as it flies, it sees the form of Alexis lying there on the ground. He flies down and sees that he's dead. He takes wing again and flies to a holy well. Scoops up water, takes it to where Alexis is lying, sprinkles this holy water onto the body of the prince. Possibly he steps backwards over him several times. And Alexis comes back to life. And he thanks the falcon who's standing there before him. And he says to the falcon, I must rescue the Sun Princess. I must go back to the giant's castle and try again. I must do something. The world is dying and it's my fault. What am I going to do? Maybe I get a horse. Maybe that way I'll be able to outrun the goat. And the falcon says, wait, Alexis. You're brave. You're really brave. I'll give you that. But you're not quite smart enough for this yet. Because that goat is faster than almost any horse you'll find on the face of the world. And besides, the giant cannot be killed by normal means. You see, the giant has hidden his life inside an egg, inside a duck, on a nest, on an island, just off the shore at the end of the world. If you want to defeat the giant and get the Sun Princess back into the sky where she belongs, you must find that egg. And Alexis hears this and he nods and he says, yes, I must find that egg. I must get the fastest horse I can. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And he makes to go away, and the falcon says, wait. A horse, yes, you need, but no ordinary horse will be able to go to the end of the world. To take you there, to take you on that journey, you need a horse from the stables of Laume the witch. And Alexis shudders to hear this name mentioned. The falcon nods and says, yes, you must go to the world of Laume and serve as her stable boy for 3 days. Make a bargain with her. She won't resist. Serve as her stable boy for 3 days, and she will give you one of her horses. And that horse from the world of Laume will be able to carry you to the end of the world. Alexis nods and says, I will go then. And he turns around, bids the falcon goodbye, and instead of walking north to the land of ice, he walks south. And he walks and he walks and he walks. The ice is gripping everything deeper and deeper. Nothing is moving on the face of the earth now, apart from Alexis, walking and walking and walking. Whether it's a day or a week or a month or a year, I don't know. But Alexis eventually finds himself in the kingdom of Laume. It's a terrible place. This desolate wind howls around Alexis as he walks. But by and by, he comes to a house. It's hardly a house, it's a shack. It's half fallen down. It's covered in cobwebs and dust. Emaciated dogs roam in the yard, picking up bones. Alexis looks at this place and he knows that it is Laume's home. And Laume, some of you may not be acquainted with Laume. And I'll tell you, the best way to imagine her is that she is Baba Yaga's Lithuanian sister. She is something like that. And if you've not met Baba Yaga yet in stories or otherwise, then, well, I think it's high time you did. But Laume is a fearsome, fearsome witch. Not a hedge witch, not actually a herbalist, nor a midwife. She is a witch of the deep, deep dark. And so when Alexis knocks at her door, he's trembling in his boots. And the door opens, and there she is in all her hideous splendor, bent over, eyes dark and piercing. And she looks at the prince, and she smacks her lips and says, well, who have we here? Do come in. She turns around and she ushers him into her room. And Laume, they say that her nose is so long that she can actually coil it up and use it as a pillow. And sometimes on days when it's particularly long, she has to flop it over her shoulder in order not to trip over it. But she shuffles in her rag into her kitchen. She says, sit down, you must be hungry. And Alexis sits. She puts a bowl of something hideous in front of him. And he stirs it with a spoon. And he says, Laume, I've come to strike a bargain with you. She says, a bargain? I like bargains. Tell me. And he says, if I can serve as your stable boy and look after your horses for 3 days, will you give me one of your foals? She says, yes. Oh, yes, that bargain. Yes, I think so. I think we can do this. And so she spits on her hand and they shake on it. It's a terrible moment for Alexis. And he eats some of this food that she's presented for him. And she smiles and says, tomorrow morning you can take my 12 horses out. Look after them. Make sure you bring them back safe and sound. Because if any of them are missing, it will be you in the soup tomorrow night, okay? And Alexis nods and says yes. And as he's eating this soup, there's things, horrible things floating around in it that, yeah, And when her back is turned, he takes them out and he drops them down onto the floor. He sees that there's a cat under the bench, and the cat gobbles them up and smiles at him. When Laume's out of the room, the cat whispers to Alexis and says, be careful, Alexis. She will try and trick you. Tomorrow, when you take the horses out, they will turn into fishes. They will turn into fish and swim off in the river. What are you going to do? These 12 horses are Laume's daughters. And Alexis listens to this. He spends a sleepless night that night, wondering what on earth he's going to do. The next morning, he goes to the stables, and there are these 12 magnificent black mares. And he leads them out into the meadows. And there's a river next to the meadow. And the horses graze. And Laume has kindly prepared a packed lunch for Alexis. Lovely piece of cheese and an apple. And Alexis eats the cheese at lunchtime. And the cheese has an enchantment on it that causes him to fall asleep. And as soon as he's asleep, river, and sure enough, they turn into minnows and off they start swimming. And when Alexis wakes blearily from his terrible dreams, he sees that they're gone and knows that they've turned into fish. And he doesn't know what to do, and he remembers the silver handkerchief in his pocket, and he takes it out and he shakes it. And nothing seems to happen for a while, and he thinks maybe the spell doesn't work in Laume's kingdom. But then he sees the fin of a fish coming up the river. And coming up to the shore, he sees a pike. And he goes over to the pike and greets him and tells the pike what has happened. And the pike turns himself into a crayfish and starts chasing after the minnows, snapping at their tails. And the minnows are so terrified that they leap out of the water. When they land on the banks, they turn back into horses, and when all 12 of them are on the banks of the river, the pike swims off, and Alexis leads the horses home. And when he gets home to Laume's home with all 12 horses, do you think Laume is delighted to see them all return? No, she is absolutely furious. She is spitting nails. She's spitting her teeth out with fury. And she curses those horses terribly. And as they're having their evening meal that night with Laume brooding and cursing under her breath, she slices away at sausage savagely. Alexis is eating his soup, and he's dropping the bits onto the floor, the things for the cat, and the cat eats them. And when Laume's out of the room, whispers to Alexis, you did well, but tomorrow the horses will turn into woodpeckers. What are you going to do, Alexis? What are you going to do? And Alexis has another terrible night's sleep in Laume's house, and the next morning leads these 12 mares out into the woods. And Laume's given him a packed lunch again, apple and cheese again. Lovely, thinks Alexis. He's really not very bright, but he sits down for his lunch and he eats the apple and he eats the cheese, and it has an enchantment on it, and he falls asleep. And as soon as he's fallen asleep, the horses turn into woodpeckers and fly off into the forest. And when Alexis wakes from the terrible dreams of his cheesy sleep, he sees that they're gone. And he thinks to himself, what am I going to do now? He reaches into his pocket, waves the silver handkerchief, and waits until he hears the thunder of wing beats behind him. And down comes the falcon. He tells the falcon what's happened, and the falcon looks about him and turns himself into a sparrowhawk. and flies off into the forest and chases the woodpeckers until they are so afraid for their lives that they emerge from the forest and turn back into horses. Alexis leads them home, having thanked the falcon. And when he returns to Laomei's home, do you think she's delighted this day to see him come back with the horses? No, 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 no. If she was furious the day before, she is incandescent with rage today. And as they have their evening meal, and she's really just banging a dagger on the table now, Alexis feeds the lumps of matter to the cat, and the cat whispers to him, "You did really well. Keep going. But tomorrow they're going to turn into grubs. What are you going to do, Alexis? What are you going to do about that?" And Alexis has another terrible night's sleep in Laomei's house. He leads the horses out that morning, and Laomei's made him another lovely packed lunch. And they go off to the forest again. And Alexis sits down, opens up the cloth for his lunch, cheese and apple again. Fantastic, he thinks, I really like cheese and apple. And so he tucks into it and he falls fast asleep, and the horses turn themselves into grubs and hide under the bark of the trees in the forest. And when Alexis wakes up from his weird cheesy nightmares, he looks around, the horses have gone. He takes out the silver handkerchief, waves it, and waits, and who do you think comes along? The falcon again. The falcon comes along, of its feathers, lands beside him, and Alexis tells him what's happened. And the falcon this time turns himself into a woodpecker and goes into the forest and starts burrowing into the trunks to get the grubs out, and scares them half to death, so that they wriggle out from under the bark, come out of the forest and turn back into the horses. Alexis leads the horses home for that third day, and Laomei, when she sees him approaching, she's just breaking her collection of bones over her knees in fury, banging her fist on the table and cursing those poor horses. Alexis is very pleased with his work, as you can imagine. That evening, as Laomei sits, their horrible elbows on the table, scowling at him, muttering under her breath, he discreetly drops the things onto the floor and the cat eats them. And the cat says to Alexis, "You've done so well. But tomorrow, Laomei will try to trick you again. She'll try to give you the worst foal. It will be no good. But she will have cast a spell, so that the best foal that you see is the worst, and the worst is the best. You must choose the sickliest foal." The cat falls silent, and Alexis sleeps that night. And the next morning, he goes to greet Laomei and says, "Laomei, we had a bargain. I've served you for 3 days. I returned all your precious mares. Now take me to your stable, and I will choose my prize." And Laomei gives him a horrible look with her terrible eyes and says, "Yes, the bargain. Come with me." And they go down to Laomei's stables, these incredible stables of Laomei the witch. She shows him all the foals. She says, You'll want this one, I imagine. It's a lovely foal, very fast. She's going to be the fastest horse in the world. I think that's what you'll need." And Alexis looks at this foal, and it's magnificent, rippling with muscle already. And he casts his eyes around the stable until he sees him in one corner of sodden straw. There's a sickly little foal, glazed eyes, a skeleton with skin. And he says, "Laomei, that one, that is the foal for me." Laomei grinds her remaining teeth together until there's nothing but fragments in her mouth. And she says, "Curse you, but take that foal and get out of here." And so Alexis takes this foal in his arms and he walks away from Laomei's house, out of Laomei's kingdom. And he walks and he walks and he walks. And I don't know how far he's walked, but it's many miles carrying this sickly foal. But gradually, as he leaves Laomei's kingdom behind him, the foal begins to grow and grow and grow until, in no time at all, it is the most magnificent horse that the world has ever seen. This horse is Laomei's granddaughter. Can you put another log on the fire? Well, when Alexis sees this amazing horse standing in front of him, he bows to it because it's the only thing he can think of to do. And the horse speaks to him and says, "Prince Alexis, tell me, where would you like to go?" "Anywhere. I can take you there in an instant." And Alexis says, "We must go to the end of the world. They say that no mortal horse can take me there. Can you?" You're right there.
Yeah.
"Can you take me to the end of the world?" And the horse looks at Alexis and says, "Oh yes, I can take you there. Climb onto my back, hold tight to my mane. It's going to be a rough ride." So Alexis climbs onto the back of this horse, holds as tight as he can, and the horse leaps into the air. Where its hooves touch the clouds, yes, great forks of lightning strike down on the earth, and it gallops across the clouds until it comes down to land. And where it comes down to land is the shore at the edge of the world. The sea beyond the world begins there. And sure enough, just out to sea there is an island. And Alexis looks out at the island. And he sees that the water is infested with serpents and beasts, a great roiling, boiling mass of toothed life. And he knows that he can't swim across there. So he takes the silver handkerchief once more and he shakes it. Sure enough, a pike approaches the shore. And Alexis tells the pike, "On that island, on the shore of that island, there is a nest. And on that nest is a duck. Can you fetch the duck for me?" And the pike says yes, and swims across the water, hurls itself into the air at the shore of this island, and seizes this strange, unsuspecting duck in its teeth. And though the duck writhes and struggles to get away, the pike holds it fast, as strong as it can, and it swims back across that perilous strait and comes to the shore and presents the duck to Prince Alexis. And Alexis holds the duck tight and he squeezes it until the egg comes out of it, and then holding the egg in his hands, Alexis thanks the pike, climbs back onto this magnificent horse, and the horse springs into the air, and they ride across the clouds from the end of the world into the far north to the giant's castle. And Alexis gets off the horse and he stands there at the gates of this castle and he bangs on the gates and says, "Giant, come and meet me here and meet your end." And the giant comes down in his own time down the stairs, opens up the gates, stands on the steps with his club and says, "Alexis, I thought I had taught you the necessary lesson, but it transpires that I did not. prepare to die a second time. And Alexis says, no, no, no. Because in my hand, I have the egg that is your life. Look around you now, giant, because this is your last moment alive in this world. And then with the egg in his palm, he closes his fist and crushes it. And the giant falls dead on the spot. Prince Alexis wastes no time at all, going up into the giant's castle, breaking every single iron chain wrapped round the Sun Princess. And they kiss, they embrace, joyful words are spoken between them. And then they leave the giant's castle. They climb onto the back of that great black horse and they ride up into the sky, and the Sun Princess's magnificence blazes out and the world is lit again. Flowers begin to grow and bloom. People look out of their frost-encrusted houses and see that the ice is melting. They feel joy returning to their hearts. They step outside their doors and greet their kinfolk and their beloved friends. Embrace and warmth begins to return to the world. The Sun Princess and Alexis and that great horse, they make a journey across the world. They visit a golden mountain with a golden castle. They visit a silver mountain with a silver castle. They visit a copper mountain with a copper castle. And the Queen lifts the curses from each of the brothers-in-law. And then all of them return in carriages all the way back along the journey that Alexis made until they come to the castle where this story began. And in one tiny carriage going along beside them, there is a baby, the baby of the Sun Princess and Prince Alexis. And the name of this baby is the New Moon. And when Alexis and the Sun Princess and the New Moon and all the sisters and their husbands return to the castle at the beginning of the story, well, do you think the greeting that they receive there is warm and wonderful? Do you think they all live happily ever after until the end of their days? Well, I sincerely hope so, because that, all of you out there and all the story people gathered here, is the end of that story of the Sun Princess and the 40th Door, a Lithuanian tale for you tonight. It's a very, very long story. Bless you all for listening and coming on this adventure with us. Rima Staines on accordion, Tom Holmes storytelling, Garbia from Another Story Entirely, watching over everything. Now I think we're gonna run some credits now. Do we do that now? I think we do that now. and then we're going to be here for 20 minutes or half an hour. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask us about that story, or about the music, or about storytelling, or about Gabia, do feel free to ask away. I need to do a bit of technical jiggery pokery. Can we swap places?
Let's swap places.
To run the credits.
It's very small in here.
It's very small, and we're still on this technical learning curve. But hopefully now, if I do this, that one, then press that one, then we should start disappearing. Do this, that one, then press that one, then we should start disappearing. Do this, that one, then press that one, then we should start disappearing. Do this, that one, then press Hello. Welcome to the afterness. Do you want to have a look and see if there's any questions on there? If you do Alt Tab, or just minimize that and go onto a browser. I think there should be a browser open. Alt Tab. Firefox should be open down there. I hope you enjoyed that story. It is a very, very long one. What are we on? It's about an hour and a half again. And I love telling that story. It's got a lot of peculiar stuff in, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And
I don't know what's happening. These tabs here.
Yeah.
I'm not ahead of tech. Okay.
Can you go down? Oh, no. Okay, that's not working. This is where we find out that actually no one was able to see anything or hear us.
Please don't say that. I think we should swap places again, because
yeah,
none of those look like they're supposed to look.
Here we go. Look, there's some questions on there.
There are people. There are
people, and you could hear it. That's brilliant. Look, loads of people. So yeah, questions. Are you interested in decoding the symbolisms? If yes, do you find it somehow in a process more than a question and answer issue? Okay, yes, this is a really good question. And so often, or sometimes, people will ask what the meaning of a story is. So yeah, what does that story mean? And I'm always pretty reluctant, usually, to talk about meanings of stories, although that isn't to say that they don't have them, but to inquire about what happened to you while you were listening to that story. Which images have stayed with you, and what door do they open in you? That's one way of looking at it. We can approach understanding stories in the way that we might interpret a dream. We could also do it that way, or we could look at what kind of historical or cultural knowledge or history is being passed on in stories as well. And most of the stories, I think, have got all of those things going on, and they work in all kinds of different ways and on different layers. I love what stories do, and particular stories do different things, but actually I'm less interested in finding out what I think or anyone else thinks they mean, and more interested in letting them do their strange magic on the fibres of the universe as people are listening, and trust that that does the medicine, does the thing for people. You got any?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think similarly in terms of visual art. You know, people often ask about symbolism and explanations for what this means and why you painted that, and I think when you're dealing in this kind of storied magic, it's that yes, the symbols matter, but there's a reason that we're telling you a story, and there's a reason that, you know, I paint a painting. It's not a verbal explanation of something in a very cerebral kind of way, and so it's going into you through a different channel, and I think you just have to let it do that, and trust that those things will really work their magic. Yeah, I'm very stubborn about not explaining my paintings, and I think a similar thing applies. Obviously, we can talk about it, but yeah, explaining what each thing means doesn't help, and it kind of dissects the story like a corpse. And also, I think it does different things to different people too. So, you know, there isn't just one explanation for it, and where it lands in you is important. Yeah, good question.
Should we swap places so I can
look at the laptop? Yeah, I could go peer over here.
Thank you for bearing with our disorganisation.
Hello, Ossian. I'm reading your question. He's wondering what happened to the 3 castles, the copper, silver, and gold castles, and when they left them. Do we know the answer?
I don't. Maybe you do, Ossian or she.
Ossian is our friend Ossian.
Hello, Ossian. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I'd love to get a card from you with your ideas about what might have happened. That would be really cool. I'll write back to you if you write to us. Any other?
Lots of ideas about what the symbolism might mean. The 27 iron gates, the moon cycle. Lots of greetings and lovely messages. Thank you, everyone. This really makes a difference. Are you wearing a special storytelling shirt? It's the same as last week's.
There's Helen Hatton, Charlie. Yeah. Lou says he misses seeing you in person on stage. Yes, I miss that as well, and look forward to getting back and doing that again. But we're learning a lot in the process, and hopefully Lou will see you in a field somewhere before too long. That would be lovely. I'll let you know when we can. I'm trying to read Facebook comments, but I can't quite get to them. it's just showing me about 5 of them.
I'm still annoyed about buggering up that tune. Apologies, everyone. One day maybe I won't be nervous.
I would like to say to that we are not the most polished performers of stories, and I'm quite proud of that in a way. Which sounds a bit absurd, but I hope that some quality that we were able to conjure with story and music carries something of our hearts in it, and I trust that it does, even when we make mistakes. You know, that's my heartfelt belief.
Definitely real.
Right, so I don't know whether we arrived on Twitter, but I can't really find it. YouTube, is anyone still there on YouTube? Where are you? I don't know where you are.
It's quite esoteric, isn't it? Not trying to find where we are in other places.
It's so bizarre. So yes, certainly for us, it's much easier if you watch on the Hedgespoken site or on Vimeo, because then you can do comments on that. So special storytelling shirt. This is actually a shirt that I've worn for lots and lots of storytellings. Yes, and there's long before we lived where we do now. I think, Rima, did you buy this shirt for me for my birthday?
I did, yeah.
At the Green Gathering, I think, and it is my very favourite shirt. And I do sometimes try and dress up to look nice for storytelling. It's the least I can do.
Somebody, Ava, age 10, is asking a bit more about the mask. She may have missed what we mentioned at the beginning. It was carved by Jan Zalud, an amazing puppet carver, based on a design I did when we were creating our show a couple of years ago, Iron Brown Thorncoat, which was another Lithuanian folktale. And I just thought it might be nice to have her watching over us for this story, because she's got symbolism that kind of works into the story we've just told as well. I'm quite interested in the representations of the celestial bodies and the symbol on her forehead, which I based on. There's some very beautiful Lithuanian traditional weather vanes, which kind of describe this circle of directions and more presumably. So it's a very beautiful thing, and hopefully we'll get to perform that show again when people are allowed to meet again. Any luck over there?
Kind of. Not particularly. Apologies if you're on YouTube or Facebook. I can't quite find the things at the moment. But yeah, I would love to for us to do that Ironbrow and Thorncoat and put that on a live stream. That would be beautiful.
Yeah. I wonder if we can get everyone else and squeeze them in here.
I know, that'd be tricky. We'll have to put the stage out. So on the side of this truck, there's a stage that folds out that we do shows on as well.
Well, that's the normal place that we do shows. This is the first time we've filmed inside. You found it?
Yeah.
What have you found?
YouTube. Us on YouTube and questions and things.
Don't spill your beer on the laptop.
No. Hello from Alaska. Hello, Alaska. What have we got there? Do you find there are similarities to the stories that we collect? Definitely, and part of what I'm hoping might emerge from this series of stories that we're doing is just seeing how many kind of strangely interwoven threads there are in either kind of themes or symbols or sequences of events in stories kind of that are thousands and thousands of miles apart. So you'll see that in the stories we've got to come, which are
Wait and see.
Castle of Marvellous, the Seer, the Fox, Three Golden Hares, probably Avashko Medvedko, probably the Firebird, all sorts, but they've got similarities and strangeness. So this story I told tonight has got a lot of similarities with a Russian folktale called Maria Morevna, and it actually gets quite confusing to tell because there are so many similarities but then some fundamental differences, and then this whole chunk in the middle as well, in the Sun Princess's castle, which is just utterly mental and beautiful, and I love some of the stuff that happens in there.
It's a very unusual image, that heart-shaped window in the dungeon. I don't think I've come across another story with an image like that in it. Have you?
I
particular,
have not known a heart-shaped dungeon with 27 iron doors in stories anyway.
No, it's unusual.
Yeah. I think we're tired.
Yeah, I'm really tired. We've got two small children.
Yeah. So yes, thanks to Maggie, who's keeping an eye open and an ear open for the children. Thank you, Maggie, when you get to see this. Chris Edwards, our friend and neighbour again, thank you so much for your broadband. It's literally 10 times better than ours, and it's not fair.
And if you would like to throw some coins in our hat, we're raising money to support Romani and Traveller peoples. We'll let you know at the end of this series of 6 which charity the money is going to go to. Depending on where you're watching this, there's a button. Should I point downwards? Is it below the screen on our website?
On the Hedgespoken website,
there's a button which
hedgespoken.org/Picturehouse. There's a couple of buttons there actually. One for that fund and one for
supporting us.
Yeah.
That is also something that's really important and really valued. All the people who support us in all the various ways through the Keep Hedgespoken rolling scheme, which you can add to as well, and all these things really, really make a difference, as do all your words here reminding us that there are people out there listening and watching and appreciating what we're doing. It's really, really strange times at the moment, not being able to take our truck out and perform and meet people, and I know that it's the same for all of you wherever you are in so many different ways, and things are hard and weird, and it's very strange doing things for the first time like this online, but it's great that we can reach you nevertheless.
Totally.
Yeah,
these are very strange times, and just the last few days here in South Devon, it feels like spring has arrived, and even in my 20 years in Scotland, I don't think I've ever been so glad to see a spring in my life. The daffodils are out. It was actually warm today. The honeybees are busy.
the bee landed on me today.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
And it's just, it's beautiful. So while these are peculiar times within even more peculiar times, there's joy certainly in my heart today for spring, and I hope it's with you.
Yeah, which is kind of not to be explaining any of the symbolism in the story, but it's definitely a story for peculiar times.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah!
With some darkness, and the sun being taken from the sky. Doesn't get worse than that, really, does it?
Yeah, another time maybe we can talk about what that story has to say for the collapse of things, because I think that there are some powers that story has which speak to some of that. There's a question there. What happened to the old men from the dungeon? Well, that's a very good question.
I reckon they're having a great time.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to talk too much about them. I could kind of understand them when they're in the dungeon. Once they're free and wandering the face of the earth again, I'm not so sure. I think they may have found another dungeon to go into. I think that we shall say good night. There is a question there about threes in folktales, and I'm going to save that for another time, I think.
It's definitely a thing, eh?
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of threes in that one.
There are lots of threes, but there's also sequences of threes that get broken. Your expectations about the number of witches or which of the animals is going to turn up. I don't know why. I'm reluctant to jump to conclusions about it, but it's interesting that the falcon features much more than the bear, for example. Once the bear is given over the pot of porridge, that's all we see of the bear until the very end. Whereas the falcon's kind of really sticking by it all, making sure that everything unfolds as it should, and the pike as well. Yeah. I'm just rambling now. I'm tired. I think we shall bid you all good night and press the big fade to black button.
Thank you so much for joining us, and come again next week, 8 p.m. Thursday. Yeah,
8 p.m. I don't know what story it's going to be yet. I think it'll probably be another big one. Chances are. There's a kind of a trend here. Most of the stories that we tell end up being about an hour and a half. So it's kind of feature film length, all for free, all live, and hopefully it's doing some weaving of our wider community as we go along. So thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for all your lovely comments. I'm sorry that all the tech kind of gets in the way. There comes a point where you just have to kind of let it go and just get on with the goodness. So night.
Good night, folks.
Night, Callum and Ossian. Night, you all.